Hi guys, Dennis here, and welcome to the first of an anticipated series of iOS development videos covering a variety of topics. In this video, we'll create a table view using a storyboard and populate our table using an NS array. Afterwards, we'll modify our project to use an NS mutable array so that we can delete objects from our table. So keep watching and let's get started. Okay, let's go ahead and open up XCode. And we're going to create a new XCode project. And we're going to start with an empty application and build everything that we need from scratch. So make sure empty application is selected. Click next. And for our project name, we're going to call this TableViews Part 1. We can leave the class prefix blank, make sure devices are set to iPhone, and make sure automatic reference counting has been selected. Click next, and I'll be saving this to my desktop, so I'll click create there. And we have our project. So the first order of business is to add a storyboard to our project, and to do so we simply do a File, New, File, and we're going to select User Interface under iOS. Select Storyboard, click Next, make sure the device family has been set to iPhone, click Next again, and we're going to call our storyboard Main Storyboard. Make sure our target has been selected, and we'll click Create. Okay, so our first thing that we need to do is open up our Objects library, and we're going to drag an instance of UI TableView controller onto our storyboard. And we want to embed this in a navigation controller, and to do so is quite easy. We'll select Editor, Embed in, Navigation Controller. Let's close out our Utilities panel for a moment. And one of the advantages is now we have a navigation bar in our table view. And let's go ahead and put a title on that. We're going to double click that. And since we're going to build an array of animal names, we'll just call this Animals. Next, we want to go back over to our project in our project navigator. And under iPhone, iPod deployment information, in the main storyboard drop-down list, we want to select main storyboard. Next, we want to jump over to our app delegate implementation file, and in the first method, which is the application did finish launching with options, we want to select everything except for the return statement and delete it. And this is to ensure that our storyboard is what's loaded. So let's go ahead and build and run, see what we have. And great, this is exactly what we should be getting. Okay, next up we need to create a class file that will marry to our TableView controller. And instead of using File, New, File, we're just going to do a Command N, which accomplishes the same thing. Under iOS, make sure Cocoa Touch is selected, and we'll select an Objective-C class. Click Next. And we'll call this file Animals TableView Controller. And under subclass, make sure that UI TableView Controller has been selected and not just a normal view controller. Click Next. Make sure our target has been selected. Click Create again, and we have our header and implementation file. Okay, now we need to assign that file to our storyboard, and so we'll jump over to the storyboard, select our TableView controller. Let's open up our inspectors panel, or utility panel rather, and under the identity inspector we want to make sure that the class has been set to that class file that we just created, Animals TableView Controller. Close that back out. And now we're ready to start coding. So let's jump over to our implementation file. And the first thing we need is a property to hold our array. Now, most of the time we would add this to our header file for public access, but for this simple project we'll go ahead and put it in the private section of our implementation file. So we do an at property, make it non-atomic and strong, and this will be an NS array, and we will call our array animals. Okay, so next, although our compiler will now automatically create our assessor methods for us, let's go ahead and synthesize our property so that we can refer to it in code without preceding it with an underscore. So at synthesize animals. So we need to allocate and initialize our animals array, and the best place to do that is in the viewDidLoad method. So we'll start off by coding our array using conventional syntax. So we begin with animals equals NS array alloc, and we want to init with objects. And we can just start adding our objects now. And very important to remember that when adding objects to an array using conventional syntax, we need to end it with an instance of nil. And we need to add a bracket here. And that's all there is to it. Let's see what our error here is. I think we're missing a beginning bracket, and we are. So let's go ahead and fix that. Now we have everything. Now we can also write this utilizing the newer literal syntax, and I'll show you how to do that. Once again, we start off with animals equals @ square bracket, and then we list our objects, and then we end it with a square bracket. As you can see, using the literal syntax makes writing the code quicker and much easier to read. Okay, we obviously don't need both of these statements, so let's go ahead and we'll delete the first one. Actually, let's leave the first one, and a little later on it'll become apparent why we decided to go with the conventional method. So we're going to delete the literal syntax statement. And now we'll move our attention to the TableView data source methods. So the first one, number of sections in TableView. So let's get rid of the warning. And we have a very simple table view with only one section, so we simply return the integer 1. Next item is the table view number of rows in section. And what we need to do here is count the number of items in our animals array and return that number. So we'll use the count instance method to accomplish this. So let's get rid of our warning here. And we'll just return our array name, animals, and we'll use the instance method count. And finally, on to the self-arrow and index path method. So let's go ahead and delete the code that's provided and add what we need from scratch so we can talk our way through it. So we'll delete that, give ourselves a little bit of room. So first, let's talk about memory management. So iOS has a great memory management function called DQ Reusable Cell with Identifier. So what's this all about? Well, TableViews could conceivably have dozens, hundreds, even thousands of cells, which if we had to allocate and initialize each one, would obviously suck up a tremendous amount of memory. So dequeuing cells once they scroll off the visible portion of the screen and making them available for reuse drastically improves application performance. This is also considered good programming practice, so we'll put it to work for us. So first, we need to create an object of type UI TableView cell. And we use cell equals, and we'll go with TableView, DQ, reusable cell with identifier. But we need to also use for index path. So our identifier we're going to make as the string cell. And for index path, we just put index path. Now, a word about the reuse identifier. The string cell is really a tag that is used to refer to a cell type. Now, TableViews can use multiple cell types, although in this project we'll just be using one. Now, this tag is defined in our attributes inspector for our TableView cell. So let's jump over there and make sure it's been added. So let's click on our storyboard. Go to our TableView controller. Let's open up our utilities panel. And we'll click on our cell and then click on our attributes inspector. And under TableView cell, we'll see a field that says identifier, and we need to put a capital C-E-L-L as in cell. Now we can jump back over to our implementation, close out our utilities panel. And now that we've verified that our identifier is the same in code as it is in the attributes inspector. Okay, now that we're set up to reuse any DQ'd cells, let's use an if statement to determine if we already have one, and if not, we'll create them. So we can use an if cell is equal to nil, and notice I use a double equal sign. Then we'll go ahead and, in other words, there is no cell. We're going to go ahead and create one by writing cell equals UI TableView cell. And then we want to alloc. And then we want to knit with style. And we'll just start typing UI TableView. And you see we have several styles to choose from, but we're going to go with the default style. And then it asks us again what our reuse identifier is, and we'll just put our string cell. Okay, now let's write some data to our cell text field, and to do that we simply type cell.textlabel.text equals our array name, in our case animals, and the index path dot row. And last but not least, we need to return a UI TableView cell. So we'll just simply go return cell. So let's build and run. And it looks pretty good. However, there's one thing wrong. It'd be much nicer if we could sort this table view. So let's jump back over to our view did load and sort that array. So let's close this out. Okay, so let's move up to view did load and we'll add the necessary code. And to sort our non-mutable array alphabetically, we're going to use the method sorted array using selector, and we'll use compare as our selector. So to write that, we start off with our array equals animals sorted array using selector. And our selector will be compare. Let's build and run. And that looks much better. Everything has been sorted alphabetically now. So there's only one thing left to do, and the only problem is we can't delete anything. So let's make some adjustments to facilitate deletions. We'll close this. Okay, so to facilitate the changes that we're going to make. I went ahead and deleted everything. I deleted the property statement, the synthesize statement, and everything in the viewDidLoad method. And I also ran a clean. Incidentally, cleaning removes objects and intermediate files that are created during the build process. So let's start over. So like before, we'll add a property, but this time it'll be for an NS mutable array. So at property non-atomic and strong, NS mutable array, and the array name once again will be animals. And we'll go ahead and synthesize that. Alright, now we'll move back down to the viewDidLoad method, and let's create our array once again. Now this time we won't be able to use the literal syntax when creating a mutable array, so it's back to the initWithObjects method. So we start off with our array name, which is animals, equals NS mutable array, alloc, and then init with objects. We'll go ahead and add our objects. And once again, we have to end this with a nil instance. And close brackets. Okay, and we forgot our beginning bracket here. Okay. Now again, we want this sorted. So to sort, we can't use the sorted array using selector method either. So instead, we'll use the sort using selector method. Very similar, but not exactly. And we won't be assigning the results back to our array name like we did before. We'll simply execute the method against our object. So this is written bracket animals sort array using, we want to use sort using selector. Here we go. And then our selector is going to be compare. Okay, so everything else stays the same. Our table view data source, our number of rows in section, our self-erode index path. So let's go ahead and build and run. Make sure that everything is working correctly. And it is perfect. Okay, let's close that. So now we can start with the necessary code to facilitate deleting. And we can ignore this first method that's commented. We'll go ahead and delete that. And what we're interested in is the TableView commit editing style. So let's go ahead and uncomment this method. And just to make sure that we have the right one, now that when we build and run, we ought to be able to at least get the delete indication, which we do. Now if we try to use it, it's going to throw an error, as like it did. So let's go back to our implementation, and let's code this. So it's very important to understand that when deleting from a table view, we need to implement two steps in the correct order. So first, we remove the object from our data source. In our case, our data source is our animals array. Then we need to delete the row from the table view. Now this second step has already been provided for us, as we can see right here. So let's go ahead and add our first step here. And that's very easy. Do a bracket, animals, remove object at index, and it's index path dot row. So we won't be doing any inserting, so we can go ahead and ignore the second part of this statement. So let's go ahead and build and run and see how we're doing. Let's go ahead and delete cat. We'll swipe it, delete, and it's gone. So everything seems to work. Okay, so ends part 1 of table views. In part 2, we'll get a little more sophisticated and create an array from a plist containing over 100 surgical procedures. I'll make that plist available for download on my YouTube About page. In addition to hitting what we've already covered in this video, we'll also learn how to group our TableView display. So until next time, thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my channel.